everybody, it's Eric Pappenfuss. It's Friday, so it must be a bye day. And we're here in Philadelphia at the Woodlands Cemetery at the grave of noted children's illustrator Jessie Willcox Smith. And as we stroll through the cemetery on this beautiful fall day, I want to tell you a little bit about Jessie Smith and some of the other important people who are buried here at the cemetery. Let's get right to our box, shall we? Now, Kathy, do you know Jessie Smith?
No.
All right. Well, she is considered one of the great illustrators of the golden age of American book illustration. She illustrated dozens and dozens of books. She studied right here in Philadelphia under the great Howard Pyle. And you know how by day we're always trying to talk about things that come into our collection on a weekly basis?
Yes.
Well, we just had a donation just this past week of about 75 of these great illustrated young adult books. Many by N.C. Wyeth, some by Pyle, and these by Jessie Willcox Smith. Now, Smith I tend to really like the best because she was particularly good with her illustrations of children. We have, of course, on the cover of this book, the great Alice in Wonderland. And on the cover of this book, well, you know who that is, Tales from Dickens. That's Tiny Tim.
Oh.
And she was a member of what was called the Red Rose Girls. They were a group of female artists, all of whom lived together, both here in Philadelphia and then later in the outskirts of Philadelphia. And another Red Rose girl was Violet Oakley, who is famous in Harrisburg circles because she's the one who did those amazing murals
Oh, yes.
at the state capitol. That was Violet Oakley, another Red Rose girl. Now, if you think it's at all strange that we're walking through a cemetery talking in the afternoon, don't, because this was a great Victorian pastime. And we're going to talk now about another female author of the 19th century. We'll leave those books there and continue down the path. And let's pause for a minute, Kathy, so I can show you the title page of this book by Anne Brewster called Compensation, Always a Future. And as we walk over to Anne Brewster's grave, let me tell you a little bit about her. She started her career as a poet and an essayist, and she wrote in many of the monthly periodicals of the sort of Victorian age in America. She wrote under a nom de plume. We'll pause again, and you can see here, that's her nom de plume, Anna Duval. Now, Anna, you may note, is Anne spelled backwards, but that's what she did. And this is a story she wrote called Lizzie Lawrence. Now, Anne Brewster fell in love with the great stage actress Charlotte Cushman. And Charlotte Cushman also, at the time, was carrying on an affair with Thomas Sully's daughter,
Yes.
Rosalie, which sadly led Rosalie into great despair. But Anne Brewster also regretted not running off with Charlotte Cushman, who, of course, this relationship was opposed by her family. And she wrote about unrequited love. I'll read you a little bit as we walk to her grave. No one suffers more from ridicule than a woman who is known to be a victim of unrequited love. The sneering laugh goes lightly round as if they're joining carelessly and heartlessly, feeling no sympathy for what is called a miserable weakness. At any rate, she goes on to Europe and she becomes one of the great first female foreign correspondents, reporting on the news of the day from Europe and writing a book like this, which was essentially her memoir. And what's interesting, Kathy, is in the book, she calls the book her child. And she basically says, the world has nothing to do with all this, but my little public may look more favorably on my book child when they know what an angel blessing it has provided to me. Of course, she never marries. She regrets not having married Charlotte Cushman, but she becomes an incredibly important author for the 19th century. We have many of her books at George's, along with the illustrated works of Jessie Willcox Smith. And here we are at her grave, Anne Hampton Brewster. Now we're going to walk to one more grave, Kathy, and that is the grave of a very important 19th century suffragist and abolitionist by the name of Mary Grew. And Mary Grew is partly famous because she advocated against slavery. She often gave lectures and went on lecture tours with people like Lucretia Mott and Sojourner Truth. But when she went to the great anti-slavery convention in England, World Anti-Slavery Convention in 1840, she was denied the ability to speak. And she was denied that ability to speak because she was a woman. And this caused a great schism in the anti-slavery movement, and it actually led to a meeting in Seneca Falls, New York, which is considered the sort of founding of the American suffrage movement for women. Whittier so admired Mary Grew that he wrote a poem about her. And on this beautiful fall day, may I read you the poem entitled
Yes.
How Mary Grew? With wisdom far beyond her years and graver than her wandering peers, so strong, so mild, combining still the tender heart and queenly will, to conscience and to duty true, so up from childhood Mary grew. Then in her gracious womanhood she gave her days to doing good. She dared the scornful laugh of men, the hounding mob, the slander's pen. She did the work she found to do, a Christian heroine, Mary Grew. The freed slave thanks her, blessings come. To her from women's weary homes, the wronged and erring find in her their censor mild and comforter. The world were safe if but a few could grow in grace as Mary grew. So New Year's Eve I sit and say, by this low wood fire, ashen gray, just wishing, as the night shuts down, that I could hear in Boston town, in pleasant Chestnut Avenue, from her own lips, how Mary grew. And hear her graceful hostess tell the silver-voiced oracle, who lately through her parlors spoke, as through Dondona's sacred oak, a wiser truth than any told by Sappho's lips of ruddy gold. The way to make the world anew, well, it's just to grow as Mary Grew.
Oh, that's sweet.
And this is Mary Grew's tombstone. She was unabashed in her love for another woman, and indeed would have been married if that had been allowed at the time. And that stone for her lover is here. It needs repair, as does the Mary Grew stone, but maybe as more people come to recognize the importance of these 19th century reformers, there can be some money raised to restore these cemetery stones. We want to end with a funny book, and I know that's a little hard to do in the cemetery, but I picked one which I thought all three of these women, by the way, all of them lived against the conventions of the time. They all lived with other women. They did what they wanted to do. They earned their own keep writing. In fact, Anne Brewster was very clear. She wrote a whole series of moral works for other women, telling them they should make their own money. That way they'll have their own power and they'll be able to do the things they want to do in life. Mary Grew, so instrumental in both anti-slavery and suffrage, and Jessie Willcox Smith, the predominant illustrator of the period. These are incredible, incredible women. And I thought they'd at least appreciate the funny book. Now, I realize this is questionable 1950s humor, but here it is. Just go with the title, Kathy. Teach Your Wife to Be a Widow.
Oh,
yes, dear. I know. It's actually a serious book. And it's about how women should pay more attention to the affairs of the household, at least in the 1950s, and be able to run it themselves. Each of these three women knew that lesson. And this is just part one of 2 episodes we're going to be doing here from the Woodlands. I hope you'll watch next week, and I'll give you a little bit more of a history of this amazing cemetery. But until then, keep watching Fridays at noon for Buy Day Friday.